And so Williams, 9th in the stands with 5 points, 4 from Bottas from America and 1 from Maldonado from Hungary. Just like 2011, really struggled to puncture those points paying positions, unlike last year where they finished 8th in the stands with 76 points, 45 for Maldonado and 31 for Senna, where they really did underachieve last year compared to the potential it seemed they had in the car, which really did work with those Pirelli tyres. Last year they also had a bit of experience with Senna with his year at HRT and half year at Lotus or Renault, and Maldonado of course had a year with the team. This year Maldonado was the lead in the team with his 2 years worth of experience, and alongside him was Vitaly Bottas, the highly rated rookie who was test driver last year, took most of Bruno Senna's free practices, which he wasn't really happy about, but he's highly rated by the team, highly rated by Sir Frank Williams, and so we expected a lot from Bottas compared to what the team have been saying about him. But it was a special year for Williams. They celebrate their 600th race this year at Germany. Not a great weekend for them, unfortunately though. And as I said, same amount of points as they had in 2011, same amount of points for Maldonado as well. He got his point in 2011 at a controversial weekend in Belgium where he had that qualifying incident with Lewis Hamilton. I believe he shouldn't have been allowed to race at all because of it. But this year they kind of struggled with the front of the car. They went for an unusual front wing design and it really compromised the airflow to the rear of the car, and Chief Technical Officer Mike Coughlin really did pay with his job in the end for this aggressive design at the front. Compared to last year, they went for aggressive design at the back and they struggled with the front airflow. So you know, it's kind of a reverse problem this year for Williams, and the drivers were never really happy with the car in pre-season, and it was only towards the end of the year when they got rid of these useless Coanda exhausts at the rear of the car, which, you know, all the teams were using, but it wasn't really efficient for Williams, that the car became drivable for the drivers, and, you know, they found a bit of pace, especially in America, as Bottas highlighted. And so, as I said, Mike Coughlin, Chief Technical Officer, paid with his job in July, with Pat Simmons, consultant from Russia, coming over. And Mike Coughlin, he was in NASCAR before he came to Williams. He was with Mike Waltrip Racing, where he went back to NASCAR as technical director for Richard Childress Racing in November. And so, yeah, Williams will struggle this year. Even in 2011, they had quite a handy qualifying car, but in the race, they had no pace. This year, the race pace was kind of there at times, but they didn't have a qualifying car. You know, they really did struggle in qualifying just to get out of Q1 in the early races especially. But towards the end of the year, you know, when they were putting parts on the car and other teams were perhaps concentrating for next year, a bit like compared to Marussia, you know, putting parts on the car compared to, you know, Caterham at the back, you know, they did get in that midfield battle quite a lot, quite consistently, you know, trying to fight for some points all the while in those later races. And so let's talk about the drivers. Pastor Maldonado, 2010 GP2 champion, as I was in 2011, only got a point in Belgium, finished 19th in the standings. Then last year got a win and pole in Spain, the first Venezuelan to win in Formula 1. Finished 15th in the stands with 45 points. He was 8th at China and Japan as well, 9th in America and 5th in Abu Dhabi, where his Kurz failed him when he was really battling for podium spot. So he only had 5 point scoring finishes compared to Bruno Senna last year, who had double that amount. He had 10 point scoring finishes, but he finished 16th with 31 points. This year Maldonado finished 18th in the stands with his point in Hungary, and he kind of inherited when Nico Rosberg, you know, had a failure with his car in the end of the race, and Nico Hülkenberg had a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. But he also finished 11th in Bahrain, Great Britain, Singapore and Abu Dhabi, and finished 12th in India, just about a couple of seconds off the points as well. So he's always sniffing around those points, especially in the second half of the season. Best qualifying was 13th in Canada, a bit, you know, overruled by the third place from Bottas at that race. He had no appearances in Q3 compared to last year. We had 11 appearances in Q3, including that pole in Spain, 2nd in Singapore, 3rd in Valencia and Abu Dhabi, and he even had 3 Q3 appearances in 2011. He was also out in Q1 9 times compared to Bottas's 5, including 3-1 in the first 5 races. So really struggled at the beginning of the year in qualifying, Maldonado, and they were both out in Q1 together in Germany, in Belgium, where they kind of caught out by the conditions, and in Korea as well, where the car was just miserable, frankly. But in the qualifying battle and race battle, you think on these, what I've already said already, Maldonado really struggled this year, but if you look at the battle between the drivers, it tells a bit of a different story. And when Maldonado said, yeah, this was my best year in F1, he wasn't actually kidding. So in the qualifying battle, it's 2-2 after the first few races, then 4-2, 6-4 at that halfway mark to Bottas, then 8-6 to Bottas, then 12-7 to Bottas in the end, so 4-1 to Bottas in that last quarter in qualifying. But in the races, it was 3-1 to Bottas, 4-2 to Bottas, 5-2 to Bottas, then 5-5 at the halfway mark. So you start to see Maldonado starting to get a hang of the car in races. Then 7-7, then 11-8 to Maldonado in the end in races, so 4-1 to Maldonado in races at the end of the season, so you can see the reverse there, and it was 9-5 to Maldonado when they both finished. So Maldonado, the better race driver, Bottas with his raw speed, better qualifying driver, and compared this to last year, you know, it was 15-5 to Maldonado to Senna in qualifying, and in races it was 11-8 to Senna in races where they both retired in Brazil. So a real reverse for Maldonado compared to his teammate, but you know, maybe that's like that experienced head showing a bit more this year. And he didn't have many retirements this year. He had 3 retirements in Australia, Malaysia and Monaco. He spun off in turn 1 in Australia, had a Kurz failure in Malaysia after going off quite early in the race, and in Monaco of course he had that collision with Chilton, which wasn't his fault. Chilton just moved of course on him going into the back, and they had quite a dramatic crash. Compared this to last year, Maldonado had 5 retirements and was classified 13th in Australia when he crashed on that last lap right behind Alonso, and in 19th he was classified in Malaysia. And so Maldonado, yeah, he had his moments in the second half of the season, such as in Belgium trying to enter the pits when a Force India was in the way, and he of course in Japan when he passed Bottas, you know, in the last corner, he wasn't very happy with that. And of course in America trying to burn all his bridges with the Williams team by accusing of sabotage after a miserable qualifying session. But Maldonado, the driver, was much better in that second half of the season. It looked like he matured a bit in races. As I say, he was sniffing around the points, especially in Abu Dhabi, India, Hungary. You know, he's all around there, and maybe he has matured a bit as a driver actually in that second half of the year, and hopefully Lotus can benefit from that next year. Let's talk about Valtteri Bottas though, and he has a strange junior Formula career. He either finished 3rd or 1st. He finished 3rd in the Formula Renault 2.0 NEC in 2007, then he won that championship in 2008, won the Masters F3 in Zandvoort, and finished 3rd in the F3 Euro Series in 2009, then again won the Masters F3 in 2010, 3rd in the F3 Euro Series again, and came 3rd in the Macau Grand Prix. Then in 2011 won the GP3 championship from his teammate James Collado by winning 4 of the last 7 races. Was Williams test driver as well, and of course was Williams test driver last year when he took some free practice sessions from Bruno Senna. This year he finished 17th in the stands with 4 points. Of course, that's his best race in America. He also finished 7th in Malaysia. His best qualifying 3rd in Canada and 9th in America. So he kind of likes North America, it seems. So those were his 2 Q3 appearances, and he's the 7th Finn to score points in F1 behind world champions Keke Rosberg, Mika Hakkinen, Kimi Raikkonen, race winner Heikki Kovalainen, and podium finishers Mika Salo and JJ Leto. And as I said in the qualifying battle, what you want to note from a young driver is really raw pace. If he's got that, and you know he cannot finish races, but you know, but you can improve that. You can make him, you know, stop making mistakes. But if he has raw pace as he's shown in qualifying, that's maybe someone to look out for. And Bottas surely looks like someone to look out for future years to come. He's got a great driver to learn from Felipe Massa as well, with great experience of course from his years with Ferrari and Sauber next year. And in the race, as I said, Maldonado got the better of him in the second half of the season, but you know, it's kind of a win-win situation for Bottas. You kind of expect that against Maldonado because he's got this more experience and he's been with the team longer, and Bottas is this young pup who's just, you know, a rookie in F1, and so it was kind of win-win for Bottas if he got ahead of Maldonado, such as in qualifying, or if he just lost out to Maldonado, such as in the race. So, you know, Bottas, he could always be in that spotlight, and he got those spotlight grabbing moments in North America. He had 2 retirements in Hungary and Brazil with hydraulics, and of course that collision with Hamilton, which wasn't his fault. It was just like the Chilton and Maldonado crash in Monaco. But it was a great year for Bottas. It was a very good year for Maldonado. It was a terrible year for Williams though. Let's go on to Toro Rosso. The Italian team, Toro Rosso, 8th in the standings with 33 points, 20 to Ricciardo and 13 to Jean-Eric Vergne. A bit better than 2012 where they finished 9th with 26 points, 16 to Jean-Eric Vergne and 10 to Ricciardo. But in 2012, Jean-Eric Vergne was a rookie. Ricciardo only had that half year at HRT. So with a further year behind their backs this year, with James Key leading the technical department, he delivered a tidy car. Expected a bit more from Toro Rosso, and they had a very consistent car throughout the whole of the year. Maybe not making the step forward that we kind of expected, but there's certainly a driver who did though, and that was Daniel Ricciardo. And a bit like Marussia Force India Lotus, it did really struggle in Hungary with the tyre changes, but it seemed like after the summer break James Key came up something good, and it seemed like it worked, especially on the car with this James Key characteristic where the car is very good down the straights of Italy and Belgium, and it showed again, where they were very strong in Italy especially. But as I said, they did lose out these tyre changes it seemed, and they lost out because Sauber improved as well, Williams improved near the end of the year, and they just stayed on an even kill it seemed throughout the whole of the year. They really took advantage of that in the first half of the year with 6-point scoring finishes with 3 to Vergne and 3 to Ricciardo. But in the second half of the year they only had 4-point scoring finishes, all for Ricciardo. So you can really see where Toro Rosso, they're just anomalous, it seemed, in that second half of the year, throughout the whole of the year even, anomalous. But let's talk about the drivers. Daniel Ricciardo, 2009 British F3 champion, 2010 second in Formula Renault 3.5 in Toro Rosso test driver, 2011 Toro Rosso test driver, 5th in Formula Renault 3.5, and 27th in F1 with HRT after joining after Silverstone. In 2012 he was 18th in the stands of Toro Rosso with 10 points, best finish of 9th at Australia, Belgium, Singapore and Korea, 10th in Japan and Abu Dhabi. Last year though, 14th in the standings, 20 points, best finish of 7th in China and Italy and an 8th in Great Britain. Best qualifying of 5th in Great Britain, which he inherited when Paul di Resta had his car excluded for being underweight. He was also 6th in Germany, 7th in China, Italy and Brazil. He had 7 points scoring finishes compared to 6 in 2012 and had 3 retirements, which equaled the amount he had in 2012 with Toro Rosso and 2011 with HRT. He only had 1 retirement in 2012 with Toro Rosso at Monaco with steering problems. So he had 3 retirements in 2013 though, at Australia and Monaco and Singapore, and was classified at Malaysia in 18th place and Korea in 19th place. He had an exhaust problem in Australia and Malaysia. It just burned his bodywork. They don't know why, but they fixed it for China. He had Grosjean used him as a brake in Monaco, and in Singapore he hit the wall in turn 18. Very easy to do. We've seen lots of drivers do that under the grandstand. And they had brake problems in Korea. They just used a new material. It seemed that it just burned the brakes. And so they had to retire near the end when Ricciardo was in the points, if I remember correctly. But the teammate battle was very similar to 2012 even. Ricciardo was 3-1 ahead, 4-2 ahead, then 7-3 ahead at the halfway mark, 10-4 ahead, then 15-4 ahead in the end to Ricciardo. So 5-0 clean sweep in that last quarter of the season. In the race battle, much more even. 2-2, 3-3, then 5-5 at the halfway mark in the race battle. So Vergne really showing himself in the races, at least in the first half of the season. Then you got 7-6 to Ricciardo, then 11-7 to Ricciardo, with them both retiring in Korea with that brake problem. And so in 2012 it was 15-5 to Ricciardo in the qualifying battle and 12-8 to Ricciardo in the race battle. So very similar statistics from 2012 and 2013 in the teammate battle, but Vergne was very strong, particularly in the first half of the year. They had 7-3 in point scoring finishes to Ricciardo, but it was 24 points to Toro Rosso at the halfway mark, and it was 13 points to Jean-Eric Vergne, 11 to Ricciardo. So Vergne was outscoring Ricciardo by the halfway mark, but it was 6-4 to Ricciardo overall when they both finished. But it's 3-1 to Vergne at the halfway mark when they both finished. So Vergne was having a much better races, it seemed, in the first half of the year, but Ricciardo just grew as a driver. His Q3 appearances were really putting himself in the headlines there and really making himself noticed. Vergne doesn't really particularly qualify well, but in races Ricciardo just got much better, it seemed, as the season went on. And even though, as I said, Toro Rosso not really moving up or down the order that much, but Ricciardo making sure they would get some points and be in Q3 a lot as well, as Ricciardo 9-4 in Q3 qualifying. It included 3 in a row from Great Britain to Hungary, the last 3 races of the season as well, and in China, Italy and Singapore. It compared this to 2012, where Ricciardo had 2 Q3 appearances in Australia in 10th and 6th in Bahrain. And out in Q1 appearances, it was 3-1 to John-Eric Vergne. Ricciardo only out in Belgium when the team just made an error in the changing conditions and got caught out a bit like Williams did. But let's talk about John-Eric Vergne. 2010 British F3 champion, 2011 Formula Renault 3.5 runner-up, so really following in Daniel Ricciardo's footsteps, and he was as a Toro Rosso test driver. 2012 17th, 16 points, 4 8th place finishes at Malaysia, Belgium, Korea and Brazil. 15th in the standings though last year with 13 points. Best finish of 6th in Canada, 8th in Monaco and 10th in Malaysia. Best qualifying of 7th in Canada, 8th in Brazil and 10th in Monaco and Italy. In 2012 didn't even appear in Q3, but had the best qualifying of 11th in Australia behind Ricciardo. And as I said, in the first half of the year it was pretty even between the two, and Vergne was actually outscoring Ricciardo despite having some terrible luck as well with the tyres. He had 5 retirements and 1 classified finish in 18th with Korea with that brake problem. He had collision damage with Van der Garde in Bahrain, puncture damage in Spain, puncture damage in Britain, hydraulics in Germany and transmission in Italy. And in Italy and Britain especially, he was on for some very solid points it seemed. You know, in those races where he didn't finish, Ricciardo got an 8th and a 7th. So it really does show what might have been for Vergne in those races. He could definitely score some points there. And compared this to 2012, where Vergne had 4 retirements, he had collision damage at Valencia where he stupidly turned into Kovalainen down that bendy straight. He had a suspension problem in Italy, collision with Schumacher at Singapore, and suspension in America. So he's always having the bad luck it seems on retirements. He's a bit of the Mark Webber of the Toro Rosso team it seems, but he was out in Q3 3 times compared to Ricciardo's once. He was out in Malaysia, Belgium and Japan. And compared to 2012, it was 7-3 to John-Eric Vergne. Ricciardo was out in Hungary, Korea and America. So he's always struggled with qualifying it seems, but he got a bit better last year where the car was perhaps had a bit more raw pace as well in qualifying, which Ricciardo definitely showed with all his Q3 appearances. Vergne had 4 of those at Monaco, Canada, Italy and Brazil. And as I said, in the first half of the year, outscoring Ricciardo, finishing ahead of Ricciardo when they both finished. And so it was going well the first half of the year for Vergne, but he just lost out in the second half of the year. I don't know what happened. You know, maybe Ricciardo getting announced by Red Bull really did affect him, you know, psychologically, mentally there. But he didn't say so in Korea when he was interviewed by Sky Sports. He said, you know, it made him look in the mirror, it made him, you know, stronger that he got snubbed by Red Bull for that Webber seat, which Ricciardo got on the basis of his strong, you know, Q3 appearances, especially it seemed, and then of course with his race pace, especially in that second half of the year. And so for Vergne, it's a bad time for him. He's really looking at an exit from F1 at the end of next season. If he doesn't step up in qualifying again, he did step up this year, but needs to step up again, needs to not get out in Q1. Depends how, of course, how good the Toro Rosso car is, of course, though. And he needs to get better in the race. He's always stuck in traffic, it seems, compared to Ricciardo. Ricciardo, of course, qualifying further ahead, you know, getting the car in places where maybe it shouldn't be in the race. And so he's got this clear air compared to Vergne. He's always stuck in the midfield, always battling cars. He had this in 2012 as well. Somehow he still managed to outscore Ricciardo in 2012. But for Ricciardo, you know, he could take advantage of that clear air. Well, Vergne was battling other cars and really didn't have that advantage, it seemed. And so for Vergne especially, he's got to improve his qualifying for next year. And he's up against Kvyat. That's kind of a lose-lose situation, sadly, for him next year. So for Vergne, poor year, especially that second half, but started well in the first half, but very poor second half of the season. Great year for Ricciardo, getting that vacant Mark Webber seat at Red Bull. And for Toro Rosso, we don't know. Let's go to Sauber then. And Sauber 7th in the stands with 57 points, 51 for them to Hulkenberg and 6 to Gutierrez. A bit of a come down from 2012 where they're 6th in the stands with 126 points, 66 to Perez and 60 to Kobayashi. And they had a nice driver lineup in 2012 with Perez having 1 year with the team, and Kobayashi having 2 years with the team. Of course, had 2 races at the end of 2009 with Toyota. But it was an all-new driver lineup in 2013, 2 years worth of experience from Hulkenberg with Williams and Force India. and a rookie in Esteban Gutierrez with Telmex back in, a bit like fellow Mexican Sergio Perez. But it was a very difficult year for the team. They went for this revolutionary design with these narrow side pods, trying to aggressively get air to the rear diffuser, then taking full advantage of the co-ando exhaust. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way in the first half of the year. They really did struggle with rear end grip, and the tyres used to get really chewed up, those rear end tyres, especially as shown in Malaysia and China with Hulkenberg. And so it was a very difficult first half of the year. They lost their chief designer Matt Morris as well. But then Pirelli made tyre changes to the 2012 construction, and as we saw in 2012, Sauber were very kind to the tyres then. And they also came up with big updates to the car, especially to the floor, to really improve that rear end stability. And they did that in Britain and Belgium, and it really did help the car. And along with those tyre changes, it meant they could do 2 stops now, as shown in Hungary, where they did do a comfortable 2-stopper with Hulkenberg. And when you compare that to really struggling just to do 3 stoppers in the early part of the year. And then we saw in that second half of the year how all of these changes really did help Sauber. They scored 50 points in the second half of the year compared to just 7 in the first half. And you saw teams drop off, such as Force India, because of these tyre changes and Lotus. And so you saw them battling with them and sometimes even finishing ahead of them as well. And we especially saw this Hulkenberg, taking advantage of the car in Q3 and then taking advantage of the car in the race, with batting consistently for top 5 placings, just like they were in 2012. So it's very much a year of 2 halves for Sauber. But let's talk about the drivers. Nico Hulkenberg, 2008 F3 Euro Series champion, 2009 GP2 champion, in 2010 14th with Williams, 22 points and that pole in Brazil. Then stepped back to a desk driver role with Force India in 2011. Then 2012 up to the race seat, 11th in the standings, 63 points, the fastest lap at Singapore, and the best result of 4th at Belgium, 5th at Valencia in Brazil, and 6th at Korea. But in 2013 he got into the top 10 in the drivers' stands with 51 points, best finish of 4th at Korea, 5th in Italy and 6th in Japan and America, best qualifying of 3rd at Italy, 4th in America and 5th in Abu Dhabi. Out in Q1 only once in his career in 2012 with the Force India at Italy when it just expired on him. Q3 appearances, he had 10 of those in 2013 compared to 2012 where he had 8 Q3 appearances for best of 4th in Germany, 6th in America and Brazil. He also led 8 laps throughout the year, such as in China when they went for a longer first stint, and as you would expect he just dominated Gutierrez in the teammate battle. 4-0, 6-0, 10-0 in the qualifying battle at the halfway mark, 13-1 then 18-1 in the end to Hulkenberg, with Gutierrez only out qualifying him at Singapore in 10th place. Hulkenberg was 11th. In the race battle, a bit more even, 3-1, 4-2, 7-2 at the halfway mark, 11-2, then 14-4 to Hulkenberg in the end as they both retired in Canada, and Gutierrez only ahead in Australia, Spain, India and Abu Dhabi. When they both finished the race though, it was 12-2 to Hulkenberg and 5-1 at the halfway mark. Gutierrez only finished ahead of him on track at Spain and Abu Dhabi. Point scoring finishes, Hulkenberg had 10 of those compared to Gutierrez 1 in Japan, and it was 4-0 at the half, and he only had 7 points. Sauber only had 7 points at the halfway mark. Compared this to 2012, Perez had 7 point scoring finishes, Kobayashi had 9 point scoring finishes. So it just shows how much Sauber really did drop back in with those point scoring finishes, especially in the first half of the year. Q3 appearances, as I said, Hulkenberg had 10 of those. Gutierrez only had 2 of them at Singapore and Korea, and it was 3-0 at the half to Hulkenberg, with Q3 appearances at China, Canada and Germany. But in the last 8 races of the season, Sauber was always in Q3, and for Hulkenberg it was 7 of the last 8 races and the last 6 races of the season, as they both appeared in Q3 in Korea, taking advantage of that high end speed they had and of course great traction out the corners. Compare this to 2012, it was 7-6 to Perez in Q3 appearances. So in the end, we really did show the pace of that car in the second half of the year, especially with all those Q3 appearances, and it wasn't too dissimilar in the end to 2012 in Q3 appearances. For retirements, Hulkenberg had 1 did not start in Australia with that broken fuel pump, 1 retirement in Canada with collision damage Guido van der Garde, where a bit like the Hamilton-Bottas incident in Brazil or the Maldonado-Chilton incident in Monaco, Hulkenberg just didn't see van der Garde on his outside going into a large chicane and just made contact with him quite silly. And he had 1 classified in India with a brake problem. Compared this to 2012, he had 2 retirements in Australia and Abu Dhabi and 1 classified in Italy. So he doesn't like Australia. I don't think he's even completed a race up in Australia, so that might be a goal for 2014 with Force India. But just a brilliant year from Hulkenberg, just flat out all year long. Even when the car was struggling, he was battling for points there in the early part of the season. And normally he's been in his F1 career, he started the year slow and then just got better and better as it's gone on. But this year he was on it all season long, and it's a shame that he didn't start in Australia. I'm sure he would have been battling for points there as well. But yeah, Nico Hulkenberg, he just made his stock higher this year, and it is amazing. He's not in the top 5 team, and his best race of the season by far was in Monza. Best weekending of the season by far was in Monza, where he finished 30 seconds ahead of Gutierrez in the race, and he was battling for a podium with Ferraris and Mercedes, and Gutierrez was just battling to get into the points. Compared to his career, where his most hailed acclaimed driver of the year, where he finished 4th, he was only 10 seconds ahead of Gutierrez in the end, and Gutierrez was 11th, stuck behind Perez for that final points playing position. And Hulkenberg was battling with Alonso and Hamilton and Rosberg and Button, but he had a great top end speed, as I said, and great traction out the corner, so the car really suitable to battling those guys and defending. Well, in Monza he had a car batting for the podium, and it's amazing he doesn't have a podium in F1 yet. I was thinking he definitely did deserve it at Monza. But let's talk about his rookie teammate Esteban Gutierrez. So a bit of history on him. 2007, second in Formula BMW USA. 2008, first in Formula BMW Europe. 2010, the first GP3 champion. 2011, 13th in GP2 with a win and the Sauber test driver. 2012, third in GP2 with 3 wins, and again the Sauber test driver. 2013, 16th in the standings with 6 points. Best finish of 7th in Japan and 11th in Spain and Korea. Best qualifying of 8th in Korea and 10th in Singapore. Out in Q1 10 times, getting 5 of the first 6 races. Only at Malaysia, where he qualified 14th, he wasn't out in Q1. Then it was 3 and 4 from Great Britain to Belgium, and the last 2 races of the year. Compared to 2012, Sauber only out in Q1 twice with Perez, and 22nd in Australia and 24th in Monaco due to that horrible qualifying crash. So Gutierrez really did struggle to adapt to qualifying in F1, especially when the car was terrible in the first half of the year. He had 2 retirements at China when he used the till as a brake and transmission, and Hungary. He's also classified in Canada when he had an accident coming out of the pits. Compared this to 2012, Sauber had 6 retirements with Perez and 4 retirements with Kobayashi, and are classified in Hungary. So much more reliable car this year for Sauber, 2013 for Sauber. But Gutierrez is all about learning and improving, and he definitely learned in the first half of the year. Don't get out in Q1 and don't be stuck in traffic in the races especially. But he did have a great race at Spain. He got the fastest lap. He was the second youngest guy to get a fastest lap in F1, behind Nico Rosberg in 2006 at Bahrain when he was 20 years and 258 days old in his debut for Williams. Gutierrez was 21 years and 280 days old when he got that in Spain. And he's also the 5th youngest guy to lead a race in F1, with those 2 laps in Spain going longer on that first stint. The youngest, of course, is Sebastian Vettel at 2007 Japan Grand Prix, with 20 years and 89 days old he was. And the top 5 is filled with modern drivers: Sebastian Buemi at 2010 in Canada, Alonso with Renault in 2003, and Kubica at the 2006 Italian Grand Prix with BMW. So yeah, very modern trend to be young and leading races. And so for Gutierrez, as I said, he definitely got better in the second half of the year, out qualifying impressively Hulkenberg at Singapore and getting that finish in Japan in 7th place, batting with the likes of Nico Rosberg, who won a race in 2013. So he definitely did deserve a second shot in F1, and it was a good year for Gutierrez in the end. In our first year, very difficult to adapt as a rookie, but in the second half he was a good driver. For Hulkenberg, brilliant year, as I said. For Sauber, very difficult year to start with, but they got great improvements in that middle part. The tyre changes did help them, and so I do expect them next year to be batting for a top 6 finish, as it was a mixed year for Sauber. And we are going on to the top 6 next.